Hi everybody, I'm Bob Kovacs, and this is a 5 kilowatt Coleman Powermate generator. Its normal output is 5 kilowatts and it can peak up to 6,250 watts. So it's a pretty powerful generator. We got it for free because the people who had it said they couldn't get it to work. When I talked to them, they said the last time they had it working was a couple years before. So I'm gonna see if I can get it going. I'm of two minds about this. Do I put some gas in it and try to fire it up and get it working and maybe it'll work? Or do I just go ahead and take it apart because I know it's going to need maintenance? It looks like it was maybe sitting under a tarp in their backyard. It's all filthy and covered with dust and dirt. So I think that the best thing to do is to just take it apart as is, clean everything up, and hopefully once it's back together we can get it started. So that's what I plan to do. And let's start tackling this project and see if I can make this derelict generator work again. One reason why I want to get at it right away is because the gas tank looks to be bone dry. And it's always nice to work on something like this when you don't have to worry about gasoline trickling on you. Now the generator has an on-off switch here, and I don't know if the people who had it before even knew about it, so they might have been trying to start it with the on-off switch off. One thing I like about this Subaru Robin engine is the air filter. This is more like a car air filter than an air filter typically seen in a yard implement like a generator. In fact, it's better than any generator air filter I've ever seen. It has an easily snapped off cover that's just like a car, and inside is a foam air filter. Something else I like about this generator is the folding handle. When you unfold the handle, and assuming the generator has wheels, this one's missing its wheels, you can easily roll the generator around and then the handle folds back up. However, the handle is in the way for getting at the things I want to fix. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the handle off. The gas tank is attached with 4 screws. You can see 2 on this side, there's 2 on the other side, and they are pretty small hex head screws. I'm going to go ahead and remove them. All the screws are off, so in theory, all that's left should be a hose holding this on. And it looks like the hose is right here. So to remove this hose, I've got to remove this clamp. So let's see if I can get it moved. There we go. And now I have to separate this hose from the valve that it's connected to. So now everything should be loose. Underneath the gas tank is this metal shield, so I'm going to get it out of the way as well. And so now I can get at all of the top of the engine. The first thing I'm going to do is vacuum up so that none of this dust and dirt falls into anything that I open up subsequently. So let's get started with vacuuming. This is the recoil starter that you pull to start the generator, and I noticed that it seems a bit stiff and that dust and dirt is falling out of it. So heaven only knows what might be in there. There's 4 bolts that attach it, 2 down below and 2 up top. I'm going to remove them, take the recoil starter off, and make sure that it's cleaned out good. These are the bolts that we're holding the recoil starter on, and look at the condition of them. They look absolutely brand new. I have the impression that this generator was never used very much, that it mostly just sat around and gathered dust, because the bolts and some of the other components just look to be in excellent condition. This is the back side of the recoil starter, and it is dusty and dirty, so I'm just going to vacuum it off and try to get all the dust and dirt out and make sure that it works smoothly. Right now it just seems kind of stiff. I cleaned up this recoil starter and now it's ready to put it back on. I lubricated it so it works more smoothly as well. So let's get it back in place by starting this bolt and get the other bolts in there. Once all the bolts are threaded in, I'll snug them in with the ratchet. In my experience, the thing that is the most problematic with a implement like this that's been laying around for a while is the carburetor. The carburetor has gasoline that's gunked up inside of it, and it is behind the air filter. So the next step in the process for me is to get the air filter off and get the carburetor out and start cleaning the carburetor. So I've got to get this bolt out, and there's a few other bolts that I need to get out as well. And I don't know if you can see, but it looks like there's a B down in here. And it's on the wrong side of the filter. It's on the side of the filter that allows things to get into the carburetor. So somehow a B got in there. Remove the two nuts near the top of the air filter housing that hold the air filter housing to the engine. The second nut holds down a clamp that keeps the air hose from flopping around. There's those two nuts and this bolt holding the air filter assembly on. And with everything now loose, it should come off. Now there's this tube that runs into it that just goes into the side here and comes right out. In the throat of the carburetor, there's this powder, gunk or dust or whatever's in there. That should be absolutely clean in there. So this is a sign that this has been laying around for a while. This hose carries gasoline from the gas tank to the carburetor. I'm going to take it off so I can take it to an auto parts store and get a replacement piece of hose. So that's what I'm doing now. With the clamp removed, the hose itself should pull off with a little bit of effort. And the carburetor should come off now. Now I've got these linkages here that I need to deal with, but now that I can twist the carburetor, I can, number one, get this spring out, and number two, get that linkage out. So now the carburetor is totally free. I can put this on a workbench and work on it there where it's a lot more comfortable and I can better see what I'm doing. Now that the carburetor's off, I've set up a little makeshift workbench because I'm going to disassemble the carburetor and I'm going to use a piece of stiff steel wire to shove into tiny little holes and tubing and orifices within the carburetor to clean them out. Now, almost certainly there's some varnish that's gunked up some of those and is going to cause the carburetor to not deliver fuel correctly. So let's get started on that. I'm going to use this Workmate kind of workbench here to be able to clamp this in so that I can better get bolts and screws out. So let's get started with doing this. This is the carburetor. It's mostly upside down. This is the float bowl right here. This is a little bowl which is usually filled with gasoline, and inside of it is something called the float. And it's a seriously important component as far as a carburetor is concerned, but I'm mentioning all of this because this may actually have some gasoline in it. And I have it upside down. Hopefully the gasoline won't spill out on me when I undo this screw. This screw here will drain any gasoline, assuming I have it upside down from the way it now is. This bolt here actually attaches the float bowl to the carburetor. Okay, so this is the drain screw. So I took the drain screw off the float and I tipped it upside down, and there was some really brown gasoline in there. So it's old gasoline. I'm sure it is just filled with varnish and just ready to clog the orifices and passageways inside the carburetor. So I'm going to now take the bolt off that holds the float bowl, and we'll then see the float bowl and clean it out. Okay, let's take this bolt off. And this will hold the float bowl on. I'm going to loosen this. Let's see what happens when I tip it upside down and see if there's any remaining fuel in it. Now, gasoline will dissolve some plastics, so that whenever you're dealing with gasoline, you need to drain some gasoline. You should drain it into a metal or a glass container. So I've got a glass bowl underneath me here. Let's see what happens when I take this off. Okay, so it looks pretty brown in there. Not too bad, I've seen worse. This is the float right here. I'll be taking the float off, and then we'll be cleaning some passages. I do see that there is a bit of gasoline in there, so I'm going to pour it out. Some very brown looking gasoline. The right way to clean a carburetor is with some carburetor and choke cleaning fluid. They sell this at every auto parts store. You can get it at Walmart and probably many other places. It's not terribly expensive, but it's the right stuff to help dissolve the varnish that's in these carburetors and flush it away. So the next step in the process for me is to disassemble a little bit more of the carburetor, and then I'm going to be flushing the components with this to clean that varnish away. I've got to drive the pin that's holding the float in place so that I can remove the float to better clean this. And usually these pins just slip out, but this one, that's all it took was a little tap and it drove out. To get the float off completely, we have to remove this screw. With that screw out of the way, you can now pull the float off. Hanging from it is this needle valve. Be sure that you don't lose that. That's an important part of the carburetor. Once you start cleaning the carburetor, it's good to be wearing goggles because the carburetor cleaner spray is going to be just going everywhere. So wear goggles and keep your mouth shut, and that way you'll be happier. I also need to clean the float bowl. Look at that brown stuff coming out of there. And I'll scrub it a bit with a toothbrush to loosen up any gunk. I recommend that you do not use your wife's toothbrush for this. And I'm going to get some cleaner on the needle valve. Just to get it clean too. Finally, the float. Okay, so the time has come to take the steel wire and run it into any orifices in this. Every one you can find. So this is the pipe that brings gasoline into the carburetor. I'm going to start with that and just run it in and out. Every now and then when you do one of these jobs, all of a sudden you'll feel it break free, and that's when you knew that there was a blockage there, and you've now cleared that blockage. So just run it in and out and try to get anything freed up. Sometimes I don't know if these are orifices that actually do anything or not. Down in the float, this is the port where the needle valve goes, so you know that there's a tiny little passageway in there. And just run the wire in and out of these until you're sure that there's nothing in there that's causing it to jam up. Now, copper wire might do the trick. This is steel wire, which is what I recommend. You might be able to use a small paper clip. Now that seemed to stop me at first, and then the wire went further in. This wire, I think, was for a picture hanger wire. Well, the carburetor is now all apart and it has been cleaned, so now it is time to put all the parts back together and see if we can get Humpty Dumpty all to fit together nicely. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the needle valve and put it on the float. Slide the float down over where it goes. There's the pin for the float, so we need to get the pin back in. There we go. Might need to be tapped in a little bit. The screw is the next thing to go in, and I just reamed a steel wire through it to make sure that it was clear. So now I'm going to screw this in here. Finally, for the carburetor anyway, the float bowl goes on and the bolt goes in that holds it in place. Snug it down, and the drain screw goes in its hole. Next, I slide the carburetor onto the bolts. And we have to connect the linkage like that, and the spring like that, and back in place. Now I'm going to put in the new gas line that runs up to the gas tank. Well, the hose is a tight fit, and that's a good thing. And I have a screw-on hose clamp for it. The gasket between the carburetor and the air filter housing is next. Then the air filter housing. The air filter housing has two nuts, one here, one behind, and a bolt that goes down there. So let's start with the bolt, and next the nut. And tighten the bolts and nuts. For the third fastener, it has a clamp on it that holds in this air hose. So get the air hose in its hole and get the clamp over the stud, thread on the nut, and tighten it down. I figure that I'll be replacing the spark plug, but at a minimum I should be checking it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. And that looks pretty good, not too bad at all. So to clean this up a little bit before we put the gas tank back on and hide everything, I'm just going to use a little water and wipe this get some of this dirt, mud off. We started using a spray bottle, but ultimately had to use a garden hose to get all the dirt off this tank. So we took some time to clean up the gas tank, which was absolutely filthy. I mean, literally mud came off it. And now I'm going to spray some Armor All on it and rub it in so it gets a little bit of a shine. Looks kind of like new. Putting on the heat shield that goes underneath the gas tank. Put the air filter in. And the cover back on. And the last piece of the puzzle is to put the tank in place. And get its screws in. I bought a new piece of gas line that's longer than it needs to be, so I will cut it off. Put the clamp on it, push it in place, and get the clamp in place. And that's it. The repair work is done. Well, this is finally the moment of truth. I'm going to take the gas cap off, pour some gas in, flip a couple of things down there, and see if the generator starts. There are three things we need to do to prep for starting. First is to turn the gasoline valve on, so now gasoline's flowing to the carburetor. Second is the engine cutoff switch. Right now it's off. I need to turn that on. And finally the choke, which is open. I need to close the choke. Now we're ready to give the rope a pull and see if it starts. I'm impressed it started on the first pull. However, it quickly stopped. What you saw before was me actually pulling the rope the first time and the generator started. It ran for just a few seconds and then it stopped. And my lovely camera operator did a little research online and discovered that the cause of that specific operation could easily be low oil. Now, I had checked the oil and it had good clean oil in it, and it was up to a certain mark on the dipstick. I thought that was the correct mark. But I looked at the manual and that there's a second mark that I hadn't noticed, and it looked like the oil needed to be up to that second mark. So I just put some more oil in it, and here we go trying to start it again. So switch is on, gas is on, choke is on, here we go. So the generator has started. It's running pretty good. I have it connected to a heater that's drawing 1,000 watts and it's running pretty smoothly. So I guess this is a video on how to successfully rehabilitate a generator that hasn't been used in a couple of years. People thought it didn't run, and it was fairly simple actually to get it running again. Hey everybody, I'm Bob Kovacs. Thanks for watching.